Power of conversations, the context is building community. So when we think about what builds community, what moves people from isolation and fragmentation and competition to collaboration and connection and innovation, what makes that movement occur are new conversations. When people learn how to have new conversations together, they make a difference. New things become possible. We can create a future different from the past. So it's the quality of conversations that keep things stuck. So if you look around your community and say, there's the status quo, okay, that's declining, that isn't changing, that's about the same as it was 5 or 10 or 20 years ago, you know empirically that the same conversations have been going on around those. And you see things changing, right? If things come to your notice, the emergent, the positive deviance, things that are emerging that are different from before, what's causing those? Well, not necessarily a big change in the assets or the power structure of the community. It's not necessarily institutional or formal change, but the change is always in the quality of the conversations. Right. Well, the four conversations that we talk about, instructions from the cook, are really inspired by Peter Block's work on community. And the 4 conversations that we propose really make the difference are the following. One is the dream space conversation. And this is, what would we love to create 20 years from now? What would we love to create now that would last for 20 years? So it's the possibility. What would we love to see 20 years out? 20 years is one generation. And we go out because the length of our vision is really equal to the depth of our passion. And so that's what drives the passion, is the fact that we can envision beyond the current constraints. That's why the going out one generation is so critical. Dreaming is descriptive, it's not speculative. We're not wondering at all, because you don't even know what you're having for dinner tonight. And it's unfair to ask you, what do you think is going to be happening 2 years or 20 years from now, especially in the current dynamic environment. So building community, we create aligned vision through aligned dreams. We start to see where our dreams connect and intersect. And dreams are the first step towards making new things possible. And so that's the first conversation. Another conversation that builds community is the small acts. And these are the small experiments. What can we do today? What can we try today that's different, that helps us realize our dream? So if I want every grade school curriculum in the region to math, science, reading, to all occur as children get into permaculture, and that's the basis for their learning the basics. What's a small act? It's you and I and a teacher in Oberlin and 5 students and 2 grandparents and a few worms and, you know, Maurice's dog with 3 legs, and it doesn't matter what it is. It's the small act. Then, as you said earlier, once we start to grow and emerge and network these small acts, they become very significant. Then we have the gifts conversation. What's at the table? What do you have? You understand permaculture. I know pedagogy. I know school curriculum. Right? Somebody else knows how to get us the resources and equipment we need, for example. And the 4th conversation is the invitations. Who else do we need at this table? You and I are creating a small act. Who's the 3rd, the 4th, 5th, 6th person who can help us move this forward? Now, we call the opposite conversations that destroy or inhibit community. We call those the shadow conversations. And the shadow conversation that maintains the status quo, opposite of dream space, is the problem conversation. So it's not what's possible, we're looking at what's wrong. Right? And that's significant. If you were to call me up one day and say, you know, I'm an evil man. I want to maintain the status quo in my community. I want no future different from the past. Right? I want to protect things from getting better. How do I do that? Easy. Just make sure everybody keeps having problem conversations. Talking about what they don't want, don't like. Talking about their grievances. Okay. The opposite of the gifts conversation is the deficiency. That's the shadow of what are we missing? This is where we get a needs assessment. Let's go to Oberlin and do a needs assessment. I won't do a needs assessment. People can ask me all day long, but Jack, it's important we understand our needs. I will never talk to you about your needs. That's a shadow conversation that maintains the status quo. Because while we're talking about the 3 things you don't have, we're not talking about the 19 things that we do have and how do we engage them. So I think that's part of the regenerative conversation you're talking about. Shadow to all those are the problem conversation. The opposite of small acts is the consensus conversation. And this is kind of paradoxical. A lot of people have a hard time getting their head around this. And the consensus conversation is the permission conversation. You know, how can we get support for this? Well, what's interesting is by definition, a small act requires no support at all. So they could take a vote, and 99% of Oberlin could be against our small act. And as long as it's not illegal, and most of the being against is people being afraid or apathetic, but as long as it can realize our dream and it brings value to the community, we don't need any permission, we don't need support, we don't need agreement. So we have to stop using consensus as, so we're not making a case against consensus, because a consensus as alignment is a beautiful thing, but we can't use it as a postponement for not taking actions in the present that realize our dreams. The process, because they're all the wrong conversations. They have the ability, the wrong conversations that we call the shadow conversations. The conversation about what's wrong, who's to blame, who's not in the room, we could hold accountable, what are we missing, how are we deficient, how are we weak, how are we compared to other cities. All those shadow conversations have the power to bring people to the table. So I like those meetings. I like when everybody comes with their grievances like sheep, you know, and are herded in and lined up in front of microphones to bleat out their complaints to Santa Claus and hope that he comes, you know, at least once a year to bestow gifts upon the community. But those conversations have no power to take it beyond. 3 hours later, we're actually more divided as a community because of those conversations. We're actually more powerless, we're more disengaged, and we're looking for new ways to have hope because we feel more despair, right? So those conversations create a community that seeks more hope because it's actually despairing even more. Despair is the lack of engagement. Okay? Disengagement comes from all the fragmentation and isolation. And what we're proposing in the book, which is descriptive, we're not saying this is how it should be. We're saying when communities build in West Africa or in China or South America or North America, any part, or Europe, any part of the world, we're saying that they transform precisely because of the conversations that they're having. Okay, it was the conversations that Rosa and Martin had that made possible changes in how we look at social justice in this country. They changed the conversation.